Welcome to Babies from Beyond, the podcast that gives all babies a voice, whether they are still in spirit or already earthside. I'm Lauren Dionysius, a former registered NICU nurse turned baby soul communicator, and I'm here to share the wisdom of today's babies to guide you on your motherhood journey. It's easy to think of IVF, IUI, and assisted conception as a last resort, something too clinical or something that's really unnatural. But what if I told you that today's babies just don't see it that way? I actually get really excited about IVF and the future of assisted conception because of how baby souls see it and the opportunities that it actually gives them. What I'm finding is that more and more of today's babies are choosing to come to the earth through IVF and also other forms of assisted conception. So if they're choosing this, then what's their take on it all? What's their perspective? As I've already mentioned in previous episodes, conception energy has a very powerful impact on a soul. And sometimes even more than the birthing energy. Well, in my experience anyway. I've noticed that they're becoming more and more particular and also intentional about the energy of conception. And so IVF actually opens up a whole new world for them. So I want to share some of these reasons or some of the benefits that IVF can really offer a child. So being conceived in a clinic or a lab allows these souls to bypass some of your own trauma or your partner's trauma or even wounding that you may be holding inside your womb space. This could be around your own conception or from previous generations that you're carrying with you that you may not even be aware of. And while it can be what you and your soul are here to journey through in this life and work through, it's not necessarily always in your baby's best interests or in your baby's plan for their journey here on earth. I often find that they say, that's yours to deal with, that's not mine. It can also minimize or even prevent generational trauma from continuing down the family tree, especially if you've already been doing a lot of inner work on your own stuff. And you're here, like many of us are at this time, as one of the circuit breakers. So this additional break can also help to stop or minimize that transmission. Also, IVF is relatively new. So, unless your baby soul has already incarnated since the 70s, IVF is a whole new thing for them. It's a whole new world, a whole new way to come to the earth. Because before the 70s, there was really only one way. And so as part of this newness of the IVF process, many babies are actually on a mission, or part of their actual purpose for coming to the earth is to support IVF, to help refine IVF. So it's not just for their life and their journey, but also for the collective, for science, for the greater humanity, and also for future generations as well. Because every baby that chooses to come through IVF helps those to come by helping to advance the techniques and the protocols. Because IVF is the new kid on the block when it comes to conception. So there's still a lot of kinks to straighten out. There's still progress to be made, so much progress to be made in terms of success rates and techniques and protocols in the IVF journey. Another reason that babies can choose IVF is that it increases the chance, in the majority of cases, for multiples. This means that those babies who may be choosing to come to earth as a multiple can choose to bring a friend with them if this is part of their plan and it's what's going to support them on their journey as souls on the earth in this lifetime. And if there's one thing I've noticed and seen not just doing this work, but also in my career as a NICU nurse, is that there's more and more multiples being born. And the way I have come to see it is that more and more babies want to come to the earth as multiples, especially as twins. I haven't really noticed an increase in higher order multiples like triplets or quads or things like that. It tends to be the twin energy is a really powerful energy to bring through for these children as they journey to the earth. And IVF really favors this. It can increase the odds or increase the opportunities for a twin pregnancy. And to be honest, like multiples needs a whole episode on its own, so I will do that in the future. So now this may be controversial for some of you, and before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the nature of IVF. I know that it's not an easy process, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically, on all levels. But what I've come to learn is that babies have a different perspective. So if you want to stretch the edges of your mind and your heart, then yeah, keep listening. So what I have learned is that some babies, not all, but some have actually chosen the exact egg that they want to conceive with before coming to Earth. Not all eggs are created equal. Keeping in mind that your egg started developing when you yourself were in your mother's womb, and they continue to develop throughout your life. So IVF speeds up this process by helping to mature and release several eggs at the same time that otherwise could have taken months or even years to ovulate naturally. So many of these eggs never have a plan to have a soul attached. They never have a plan to be fertilized. It's like these extra eggs that don't really have a particular job when it comes to bringing a baby into the world. IVF allows these eggs to release a lot more quickly. This means that a baby's chosen egg can move up the queue. It can get the unchosen eggs out of the way and allow the chosen egg, I keep thinking in my mind, the golden egg, to come closer. So the way I see it, and also the way IVF babies have shared with me, is that they don't see failed IVF attempts as a failure at all. They understand that, yes, multiple failed attempts are challenging to experience, but the way they see it is it's actually clearing the way for their egg to be able to become available sooner. And sometimes these so-called fail cycles are actually part of the timing that needs to unfold. When I come across these babies who say that they have chosen a particular egg, and sometimes they'll even share with which ovary it's coming out of, I don't think it's really possible for us or babies to make this egg come up for ovulation any quicker. I don't know that process. I don't know how an ovary decides which egg is going to mature next. And as far as I know, even science can't selectively choose or predict which exact egg follicle is going to mature until it starts to. And I mean, we wouldn't know, right? Even if we could do that, there's no way of knowing which particular egg is that golden egg for that child. But what I do know is that these babies get really excited by an IVF egg collection because it speeds up this process and it matures and releases several eggs at the same time. And as I mentioned, it helps the unchosen ones get out of the way. But if their egg does come up in the IVF process, then that's when they'll jump on board. And that's often when we see a successful cycle. And when I say successful, I'm meaning beyond the first trimester, essentially. So this is why I don't seem to believe in failed IVF attempts. So that's something that really shifted my own perspective around IVF, because I was also always taught and educated that IVF was kind of a last resort. It's for women and couples that have pretty much tried everything and nothing's working. So this is like a last ditch effort. But no, it's so not that way according to what these baby souls have shared over the years. So now I want to talk about the embryos that are created during IVF, because in my experience, I haven't tuned into every single woman or every single IVF cycle, of course, but in my experience, every fertilized embryo created during IVF has a soul attached. Because in my experience, for an embryo to grow, there needs to be life force. There needs to be a greater creative energy that can help with the maturation and the cell division and all of these things that I don't believe can happen without a soul. So that's why I've come to believe that every embryo created, and this is natural as well, of course, has a soul attached to it. But the thing to remember is that the majority of these souls are not actually planning a full life here on Earth. And this is because the IVF process often creates way more embryos than we actually need or that are actually successful, right? Because imagine if every fertilized embryo was planning to have a life here, then we'd go back to having 5 or 10 or even more children in a family. So in my experience, some of these souls kind of act as donor souls. It gives more souls more opportunities to come to the earth, but without committing to a full incarnation. Because I think we underestimate the journey of the soul to earth. Being a soul floating about in spirit or whatever we do between lives, and then spending the next 80 or 100 years being tethered to a body, that's a big commitment. And it's also a huge change and shift in energy and consciousness that is required for that to happen. So coming to Earth is not a decision or a commitment that a soul takes lightly. And sometimes we need several times to be able to make that commitment. So IVF cycles allow these souls who may be planning a life in the future to come, and I don't mean this to sound dismissive, but they come to test the earth. They come for a trial run. And for some babies, this is their entire life purpose. You know, we have this, and I've talked about this before, that we have this belief that as humans, we should live until we're 100 and then die peacefully in our sleep. But this is the journey of very few souls here on Earth. For some of these souls, like these donor souls I've been mentioning, their purpose is literally just to touch the earth, to see what it's like being tethered to this body, especially if they haven't been to Earth for a while, or if they're one of those souls that have never been to Earth. It allows them to get used to the Earth's energy because it pulls the soul closer to the Earth. And as I mentioned, some need to do this multiple times before they're actually ready to stay. I really don't want to diminish a failed IVF cycle for when an embryo doesn't implant. I know that when this happens, like, many women are heartbroken, and it's real, it's valid. As I mentioned earlier, the IVF journey is physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically exhausting. And not only is there a lot going on here on Earth around the whole IVF process and all of the people and the intervention that's involved, but there's also a whole lot more action going on in spirit too, in the spirit world, as they try to also navigate this process from their side of the fence. Because I see IVF is this big puzzle with lots of moving and sometimes missing pieces too. And remember that many of these souls are just coming to have an experience before they make that commitment. So I have digressed a little bit, but I want to shift now back into these reasons for babies coming to Earth through IVF. And I want to talk especially around what family means. Let's chat first about donor egg or donor sperm, or it can be both. And what's really interesting about the donor process is that it expands the DNA possibilities. And this is something that's pretty well medically documented, that, you know, using a donor egg or sperm can reduce the risk of chromosomal abnormalities, medical conditions, etc., especially if it's familial or inherited. So that's perhaps one of the most obvious reasons, but on a more spiritual or even social level, using a donor egg or sperm is changing up what a family means. You know, it's taking some time, but we're finally moving away from that traditional nuclear family with mum, dad, and 2.3 kids. I mean, this has already been happening in the last couple of generations with divorce and less kids per family than even a generation or two ago. And so this is finally starting to shift. And what IVF also allows is that same-sex couples can also have children. And many children are choosing this. Many babies want to have the same-sex parents for different reasons, for different purposes, and that's very specific to each soul. And also the adults involved as well. It's a little bit too specific to be able to generalize here, but a lot of children are choosing this. And the same with singles as well. You don't have to be in a relationship anymore to have a baby. And not only are these creating incredible opportunities for personal and social change, but they're also paving the way for the next generation. Because again, today's babies are coming here to really shake things up in a lot of ways, but especially around family. Another reason that donors can really have a profound impact on today's babies is because it can minimize or even eliminate intergenerational trauma and also patterns, especially ones that have been repeated in families for generations and generations, and it's just like history repeating itself. Sometimes it can take a donor conception to bring fresh energy into the family, to finally allow some of these patterns to be able to be broken or shattered. An example of this is, say, a family with generations of addictions. For example, it could be alcoholism, it could be drugs, or even DV as well. These families could really benefit from a soul coming into the family that's choosing a completely different genetic lineage, especially if they come from a lineage that perhaps doesn't have those addictions or those issues. It can really help to shift the energy for the future generations. And on the flip side of this, a baby may choose to enter a family with no history of a certain struggle so that they can work on it in a really new way as well. So just to sum up this section around intergenerational trauma and patterns, I just want to be clear that nobody gets a totally clean slate in this life. We all have family patterns and we all have conditions and beliefs to work through, whether they're ours or most often inherited from our family as well. But that's part of the journey. It's not wrong. It's an important part of the evolution of the human and for our souls as well. So just to recap this episode, I really want to emphasize that IVF is not a last resort. It's an opportunity, and for so many of today's babies, it's actually their preferred choice. And it can happen over and over again that conception is not working because there's a problem. But when we tune into the soul, it's like, no, they want to come through IVF. So it doesn't matter how long you try naturally, If your baby wants to come through IVF, natural conception is not going to work. And often there will be physical issues put in the way, things like endometrial or other adenoids, polycystic ovaries, all kinds of what we label as fertility issues that are actually acting as a signpost to journey down the IVF path. So again, I just want to emphasize that IVF is not a last resort, and it absolutely does not mean that you or your body is a failure because you're not conceiving naturally. Often IVF is what babies are choosing, and they're choosing this path for very intentional, purposeful reasons, like I mentioned in this episode. So what if IVF isn't just for you and what's best for you, but also for your baby who has chosen you? Thank you for tuning in to Babies from Beyond. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to leave me a review just wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, head over to Instagram and give me a follow at Born Energy, and check out the show notes for more ways that you can connect with your baby's soul, including one-on-one readings and online programs to support you. Until next time, trust your journey and your baby. Take care.